Non-stop horse neighing outside a cave. What the farmer finds inside is unbelievable. The sun began its slow descent beyond the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft gold, amber, and deep purple. The sprawling ranch, bathed in the warm glow of twilight, stretched as far as the eye could see. The golden fields, with their quiet rolling hills, looked peaceful, as though time itself had come to a standstill. Yet beneath the serenity of the land, there lingered a sense of stillness, an almost suffocating quiet that seemed to hang in the air. It was the kind of silence that spoke of waiting for something to happen, or perhaps for something to change. As the day gave way to evening, the ranch's farmhouse stood like a sentinel in the growing darkness. The structure, once vibrant and full of life, now appeared tired, its walls worn by years of weathering. The paint had chipped away in places, and the wooden beams had faded with time. It had been years since the house had known the sounds of laughter, of voices calling out to one another. Now the porch sat empty, its rocking chair swaying gently in the evening breeze, the only sound that of the wind whispering through the trees. Inside the farmhouse, the air was thick with quiet. The only movement was that of a woman as she moved purposefully through the house, her footsteps steady but slow, as though burdened by a weight she couldn't shake off. Her eyes, dark and heavy with thought, reflected the exhaustion that came from years of battling not just the elements, but also the storms of her own heart. She had always been strong, resilient in the face of hardship, but even the strongest hearts were thin after years of struggle. She paused in the kitchen, her hand resting lightly on the counter as she glanced out of the window. Her gaze lingered on the fields stretching beyond the farmhouse, where the wild horses grazed under the fading light. There was one in particular, a magnificent creature, its coat gleaming like burnished copper in the fading sunlight. It was a sight to behold, untamed and free, moving with an effortless grace that seemed to defy the weight of the world. The woman's heart ached as she watched the horse, the ache coming not just from the beauty of the creature, but from something deeper, something unspoken that had been quietly buried within her for years. Behind her, the sound of a child's laughter broke the stillness. The woman turned to see her daughter, a young girl of perhaps 5 or 6, running barefoot across the floor with an infectious smile on her face. Her hair, a wild tangle of curls, bounced with every step, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that only a child could possess. She ran toward the door, her small hands reaching out as though to touch the world beyond the walls of their home. "Mama, Mama, look!" she exclaimed, her voice high with excitement. The woman watched her daughter, a smile tugging at her lips despite the heaviness in her heart. Her daughter was everything to her, the one light in a world that had often seemed filled with shadows. The ranch had become a home for them, but it was also a place of quiet reflection. It had once been filled with laughter and love, and yet now it was often too quiet, too still. And still, the woman could see the glimmers of hope in her daughter's eyes. The girl had an uncanny ability to find joy in even the smallest things, and it was this boundless energy and optimism that kept the woman going, even on the hardest days. Outside, the evening air had begun to cool, and the woman stood for a moment, letting the sounds of the world seep in, the distant chirping of crickets, the rustle of the trees, the soft sigh of the wind. As her daughter's giggles echoed from the yard, the woman's thoughts returned to the wild horse in the distance. It had been appearing more and more frequently on the ranch lately, its dark form standing like a sentinel at the edge of the property. Sometimes it would watch the woman from afar, other times it would disappear into the rolling hills. It seemed to come and go as it pleased, much like the woman herself. She had always felt a strange connection to the creature, a feeling that ran deeper than she could explain. Could it be that the horse understood her? Could it sense the unrest she carried inside? Or was it simply a reflection of the untamed part of herself she had long tried to suppress? She didn't know, but she did know that the presence of the horse somehow brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. It was as if, just for a moment, she could forget the weight of her past and live in the present, breathing in the stillness of the land that surrounded her. "Mama, come look!" Her daughter's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. The woman smiled again, this time more fully, and stepped out onto the porch, the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet. She found her daughter standing at the edge of the yard, her arms outstretched, a look of wonder in her eyes. The wild horse had approached closer, its dark eyes fixed on the child. It stood just beyond the fence, watching the girl with an almost knowing gaze. The woman's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen the horse so close before. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The woman moved toward her daughter, her feet moving slowly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile moment that had settled between them. She didn't know why, but she felt an inexplicable pull toward the horse. There was something about this creature, something that spoke to her in a way no words ever could. As she reached her daughter's side, she placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder, her voice soft but filled with wonder. "Do you think the horse knows something we don't?" she whispered, her eyes never leaving the creature. Her daughter smiled, as if the question was a game. "Maybe it's waiting for us to ask." And in that moment, with the soft twilight falling around them and the horse standing quietly by, the woman knew that this was the beginning of something new, something that would change everything. The early morning light had barely begun to filter through the thick veil of mist when the sound of hooves broke the stillness. The rhythmic clip-clop echoed across the quiet ranch, gradually growing louder, drawing attention to the distant hill where the figure of a man appeared, slowly making his way down the dirt road. His silhouette was framed by the rising sun, the golden light casting a soft glow around him as he approached the farmhouse. He was a man of few words, a man whose presence carried a quiet strength, evident even from a distance. Tall and solidly built, his posture suggested a life of hard work, of years spent in the fields and under the open sky. His weathered face, with deep lines carved by time and experience, spoke of battles fought not only against nature, but against the challenges of life itself. His dark hair, tousled by the wind, framed his features in a way that made him look both rugged and approachable. There was something undeniably magnetic about him, an aura of quiet confidence, tempered by the humbling weariness that came from a life lived without shortcuts. As he neared the ranch, the horses in the paddock perked up, sensing his arrival. They stood, their ears flicking back and forth as they watched the man with a kind of recognition, as though they knew him, even before he dismounted from his horse. The man, with a steady hand, gently brought his steed to a halt at the edge of the yard. He seemed to take in the scene before him, his eyes scanning the surroundings as if assessing the land, or perhaps, something more personal. He dismounted with ease, his movements fluid and purposeful. As his boots hit the ground, a cloud of dust puffed up around his feet, mingling with the early morning haze. The horses, now calm, lowered their heads to graze, as though this was just another day in their quiet world. But for the woman standing in the doorway of the house, watching the man from afar, this moment felt anything but ordinary. She had heard stories of this man, of his life, of his struggles and triumphs, but never had she imagined their paths would cross so suddenly. The stranger who had once been a name whispered in the wind was now standing at the threshold of her life, like a figure from a distant dream, suddenly real and tangible. And yet, there was no time for hesitation. This was no coincidence. She could feel it deep in her bones. This man was meant to be here. He stood for a moment, seemingly lost in thought, as if the land had a hold on him, pulling him into its quiet rhythm. And then, just as the wind shifted and a soft breeze brushed past him, he turned, his gaze fixing on the woman. It was a look that spoke of recognition, though neither of them had spoken a word yet. His eyes, dark and intense, seemed to reach right into her, understanding something she wasn't yet ready to put into words. There was a silent exchange, a recognition between two souls that could not be explained by logic or reason. Something about him resonated with her in a way that was impossible to ignore. Without a word, the man approached each step deliberate, measured, yet somehow effortless. As he drew closer, his eyes never wavered from hers, and she found herself holding her breath, uncertain of what to expect. The silence between them grew, the air thick with a strange mixture of anticipation and unspoken understanding. "Morning," he said finally, his voice rough, but not unkind. It was the kind of voice that came from years of living outdoors, from the hard, gravelly work of the land. The words were simple, but they carried weight, the kind of weight that only time could impart. The woman, still unsure of the purpose behind his arrival, nodded slowly in response. Her eyes never left his face, searching for something, some sign that could explain the reasons for his presence. She wasn't afraid, but she was cautious. This was a man who had lived a life far removed from her own, a life of struggle and survival. He was a stranger, but also, in some inexplicable way, familiar. "The horses look good," he added, glancing over at the paddock where the animals stood. "They're mine," the woman replied, her voice soft but steady. "All of them." The man nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer, as if weighing her words. "I see you've been working hard," he said, his gaze shifting back to the house. The woman didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure what to say. She hadn't expected to have a conversation with a man like this. His arrival was a disruption to the carefully built walls she had put around herself, and for a moment, she didn't know how to proceed. But there was no need for words, not yet. The quiet understanding between them was enough. The man, with his stoic presence, seemed to have an unspoken knowledge of her struggles, or perhaps he simply recognized the resilience in her. Either way, she knew this meeting was no accident. Fate had brought him to her doorstep, and she had no choice but to see where it would lead. In the quiet of the ranch there was a constant, a bond that held the very fabric of their world together. It was not just the earth beneath their feet or the horses that wandered the pastures, but the connection between the woman and her daughter, a bond stronger than any force they could face. The bond of a mother's love, unconditional and unwavering, had shaped their lives, and it was in the small moments that this bond revealed its power. The woman, despite the weight of her circumstances, had always made sure her daughter felt safe, loved, and protected. Each day began with the shared ritual of waking to the sounds of nature, the soft coo of doves, the distant clatter of hooves, and the quiet stir of wind through the trees. Her daughter, bright-eyed and curious, would be there beside her, waiting for the new day, always eager to help with the small tasks that filled their lives. Whether it was feeding the chickens or gathering eggs, there was a rhythm they followed, a dance that had become so natural it was almost second nature. But beyond the mundane chores, it was in the quiet moments that their bond truly shone. On the porch, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, the mother would sit with her daughter in her lap, both of them gazing out at the vast expanse of the ranch. Her daughter would rest her small head against her mother's chest, her eyes fluttering shut as the warmth of the moment enveloped them. The woman would hum a soft tune, one that had been passed down through generations, a song of comfort and hope. It was these moments, these silent exchanges, that reminded them both of the strength they had together. The girl, despite her young age, had a quiet wisdom about her. There was a calmness in her gaze, a sense of knowing beyond her years. She had always been close to her mother, clinging to her like a shadow, following her wherever she went. She was often seen at the side of the woman, her tiny hands gripping the hem of her mother's dress, always seeking her guidance. But it was in her laughter, the sound of pure joy that rang out whenever she was with the animals, that reminded her mother that this bond was not just about protection and survival. It was also about nurturing the spirit, giving her daughter the chance to grow, to explore, and to find her own place in the world. One afternoon, as the woman worked diligently, mending a broken fence post near the barn, her daughter appeared from the corner of the paddock, holding something small and fragile in her hands. The woman looked up and saw her daughter's wide eyes filled with concern. In her arms, she was cradling a tiny injured bird, its wings fluttering weakly. "I found it, Mama," her daughter said softly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The woman's heart swelled with love and pride. Kneeling down, she gently took the bird from her daughter's arms, inspecting the injury with care. Her fingers were tender as she checked the bird's wings, reassured by the gentle way her daughter had handled the fragile creature. She could see the raw tenderness in her daughter's eyes, a deep compassion that mirrored her own. "You did good, sweetheart," the woman said, her voice calm but filled with warmth. "Now we'll make sure it's okay." As she worked, carefully wrapping the bird in a small cloth, her daughter stayed close, watching intently, asking questions that reflected her growing curiosity about the world around her. The bond they shared was not just one of affection, but of mutual respect. The girl trusted her mother's wisdom, and in turn, the woman trusted her daughter's heart. They were a team, two halves of a whole, each complementing the other in ways that made them stronger. Later, as the day began to fade into dusk, the woman sat on the porch with her daughter once more. The girl leaned against her, and the woman wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. They watched the sky darken, and the stars slowly emerged, twinkling like tiny beacons in the vastness above them. "It's beautiful," the girl whispered, her small voice filled with awe. "It is," the woman agreed, her heart full of gratitude for this moment. "And so are you." The bond between mother and daughter, forged in the quiet moments of shared labor and simple joys, was something that would not be broken by time or circumstance. It was a bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as they had each other. In this quiet corner of the world, on the ranch that had become their home, they were not alone. They had one another, and that was all they needed. In a world where uncertainty loomed large and every step forward felt like a fragile gamble, there was a silent, steady presence: the horse. It wasn't just an animal among others on the ranch. It was a guide, a symbol of unwavering loyalty and an unexpected source of strength. While the woman and her daughter worked tirelessly to rebuild their lives, it was the horse who played a pivotal role in their journey, leading them to places they never imagined, both physically and emotionally. From the moment the woman first encountered the horse, there was an unspoken connection, a silent recognition of kindred spirits. The horse, though once wild and untamed, had a quiet wisdom about it. Its eyes seemed to hold a deep understanding, as if it could sense the weight of the world on the woman's shoulders. And in turn, she felt an instinctual trust in it, something rare in a world that had shown her so much betrayal. It wasn't long before the horse became a constant companion. Every morning, the woman would find herself drawn to the paddock, watching the horse as it moved with grace and power. The horse, too, seemed to seek her out, often approaching her with a steady gait, its presence calming the turmoil that brewed inside her. It was as though the animal understood the struggles she faced, and with every touch, every nuzzle, it whispered a promise of hope. But it wasn't just the horse's calm demeanor that made it so significant. It was the horse's actions, the quiet gestures that spoke volumes. One day, as the woman and her daughter worked in the fields, the horse appeared at the edge of the pasture, its eyes fixed on them with an intensity that seemed out of place. The horse had always been observant, but this time, there was something different, something urgent. Without any hesitation, it trotted toward them, stopping just a few feet away, its stance firm and unwavering. Curious, the woman followed the animal's gaze and saw nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, there was an undeniable pull, a sense that the horse was trying to tell her something. As if on cue, the horse turned and began to walk away, looking back over its shoulder to ensure that she was following. Something deep inside the woman stirred. She hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. With a final glance at her daughter, she started after the horse, trusting the animal's instinct more than her own. The horse led her through the winding trails of the ranch, further and further away from the familiar paths they had known. The woman followed without question, her heart beating a little faster with each step. It wasn't just the terrain that was unfamiliar. It was the sense of unknown that surrounded her. She couldn't explain it, but there was a feeling that something important awaited her, something that would change everything. As they walked deeper into the land, the horse eventually stopped at the entrance of a hidden cave. It was a place she had never seen before, tucked away in the farthest reaches of the ranch. The horse stood there for a moment, its head lowered slightly, as if waiting for her to make the next move. The woman hesitated for only a second before walking closer, a sense of curiosity overtaking any fear she might have had. As she stepped into the cool shadow of the cave, she felt the weight of its quiet solitude. It was as if time itself had slowed. The horse, having completed its task, lingered at the entrance, its silhouette framed by the fading light. Inside the cave, the woman's daughter appeared, tucked in the corner, hidden away with a sense of comfort and safety. The sight of her daughter in this secluded space, safe and secure, was all it took for the woman to realize the horse's purpose. The horse had led her here for a reason, to show her that there was a place of refuge, a place to rebuild, a place where they could start anew. The horse's role as a guide was far more than physical. It had guided them to a place of peace, to a new chapter in their lives. It had shown them that even in the darkest times, there was always a path forward, and sometimes, the way forward wasn't one they could have found alone. The horse, in its quiet wisdom, had become not just an animal, but a symbol of resilience, leading them toward a future that they could now embrace with hope. As the days passed, the woman and her daughter returned to the cave time and time again, finding solace in the stillness it offered. The horse, always nearby, remained a constant in their lives, its presence a reminder that they were never truly alone. With each passing day, the woman grew stronger, her heart more at ease, as the bond between her daughter, and the horse deepened. The days that followed the discovery of the cave were filled with a new sense of hope. Yet beneath the surface, something remained unresolved. The woman could feel it, a persistent ache that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. It wasn't the land, which had begun to feel more like home, or the horse, which had become an inseparable part of their lives. It was her past, the haunting memories of a life she had tried to leave behind, the shadows that clung to her even as she worked to rebuild. For so long, she had run from those memories. They were the kind of memories that gnaw at the soul, whispering in the quiet moments when you least expect it. She had thought that by escaping, by finding a new place, she could outrun them. But the truth was that no matter how far she went, they always followed. The past is a persistent shadow, always lurking in the periphery of one's mind, waiting for the right moment to demand attention. That moment came on an afternoon when the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. The woman stood at the edge of the fields, her hands resting on the fence as she gazed out at the horizon. Her daughter was nearby, playing with the horse, their laughter rising into the air like a song. For a brief moment, the woman allowed herself to feel at peace. It was a fleeting serenity, a momentary respite from the weight she carried. But then, from the corner of her eye, she saw something that made her heart stop, a figure approaching from the distance. Her breath caught in her throat as her body stiffened, a wave of panic sweeping over her. It was a figure she hadn't expected, one she had hoped would never cross her path again. It was someone from her past, someone whose presence had been the very reason she had fled in the first place. Her heart raced, and her mind spiraled. The memories she had tried so hard to bury surfaced with brutal clarity. She knew, in that instant, that there would be no more running. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when she would have to face everything she had left behind. As the figure drew closer, the woman felt the familiar knot tighten in her chest. Her fingers tightened around the fence, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. She took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't allow fear to dictate her actions anymore. For too long, fear had been her prison, a cage that kept her from moving forward. The figure was now close enough for her to see clearly. It was him, the man who had been part of her past, the one who had caused her so much pain. The same eyes, the same familiar presence. But there was something different about him now. He wasn't the same man who had forced her into silence, into hiding. The passage of time had changed him, and in that moment, she realized that it had changed her too. She wasn't the same woman who had fled in the dead of night, terrified of facing the world. She had grown, she had healed, and most importantly, she had found something that no one could take away from her, her strength. Her daughter's voice cut through the tension, and the woman turned to see the child looking up at her, her innocent eyes filled with curiosity. The horse stood beside them, calm and steady, as if it sensed the shift in the air. It was a reminder of how far they had come, how much had changed. The woman took a deep breath, then turned back to face the man. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. The words she had been holding back for so long felt stuck in her throat, but with a quiet resolve, she spoke. "I never thought I'd see you again," she said, her voice steady but edged with emotion. "But here we are." The man stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. There was a long silence, filled only with the sound of the wind rustling the leaves and the distant calls of birds. Then he spoke, and for the first time in years, his words didn't carry the weight of anger or regret. Instead, there was an apology in his tone, a rawness that the woman hadn't expected. "I came to make things right," he said, his voice low. "I've been trying to find you for a long time, to explain, to apologize for what I did." The woman felt a surge of emotion, a mix of anger, sadness, and, surprisingly, relief. She hadn't expected this, hadn't known what to expect. But one thing was certain. This was the moment she had been waiting for, whether she realized it or not. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about reclaiming her power, about standing tall in the face of everything she had been through. She took another step forward, meeting his gaze with a strength that surprised even herself. "I've already moved on," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. "I've rebuilt my life, and I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you." There was a long pause, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The man nodded slowly, as if he understood that the woman had found her peace, regardless of his presence. He had come to confront the past, but in doing so, he had only reaffirmed her resolve to leave it behind. With a final glance, he turned and walked away, leaving the woman standing at the fence, her heart pounding but her spirit unbroken. In the distance, her daughter called her name, and she turned to see the child running toward her, the horse by her side. The woman smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the new life she had created, for the strength that had carried her through the darkest times. As she watched her daughter approach, the past no longer felt like a burden. It was a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. The woman had confronted the past, faced her fears, and emerged stronger. Now she could finally look toward the future with hope. With the past now behind them, the woman, her daughter, and the horse began to build a new life together, each day bringing them closer to a sense of belonging. The weight of the past had been lifted, and for the first time in years, the woman felt like she could finally breathe, free from the constant shadows of fear and regret that had once held her captive. The bond between her and her daughter grew stronger, rooted not just in love but in their shared experiences, their resilience, and their unwavering determination to move forward. The days passed slowly at first, each one filled with small steps toward rebuilding. The ranch, once an unfamiliar and intimidating place, began to feel like home. The woman had grown accustomed to the rhythm of daily life, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and caring for the land that would now be their sanctuary. It was hard work, yes, but it was also a quiet joy, one that allowed her to find peace in the simplicity of routine. Her daughter, too, had adjusted to the new life with ease. The child had found her place with the animals, developing an unspoken connection with the horse that only grew stronger each day. The bond between them was undeniable. The horse had become more than just a guide. It was a protector, a companion, and in many ways, a symbol of the new life they were building. The woman watched with pride as her daughter grew more confident, her laughter ringing through the air as she spent countless hours with the horse, learning its ways and forging a bond that felt as ancient and natural as the earth beneath their feet. There were moments when the woman would catch sight of her daughter and the horse, standing together as if they had always belonged, and it would bring a sense of warmth to her chest. She realized that the child had found a sense of belonging here, in a way she never had before. The horse had not only helped guide them to safety but had become an integral part of their healing journey, reminding them that trust and love could still exist in a world that had once seemed so unforgiving. The relationship between the woman and her daughter deepened as well. The struggles they had faced, The fears they had overcome had only brought them closer. The woman began to see her daughter in a new light, no longer just a child she was protecting, but a fierce, brave soul who had endured more than any child should have to. In the quiet moments, when they sat together on the porch or worked side by side, there was a mutual respect between them, a bond built on shared strength. Their connection was further cemented when the woman found herself confiding in her daughter, something she had never done before. She had always been the protector, the one who carried the burden of their past. But now she was learning to lean on her daughter for support. The little girl had an innate understanding of the world, a wisdom that went beyond her years. She offered the woman comfort in her own quiet way, simply by being there, by offering a smile or a hug when the weight of the world felt too heavy. It wasn't just their relationship with each other that deepened. The woman found herself developing a new relationship with the land, the ranch that had once seemed foreign and hostile. The earth beneath her feet no longer felt like a place to escape from, but a place to grow into, to plant roots that would anchor them in a way they hadn't known before. She worked the soil with a renewed sense of purpose, tending to the crops, fixing the fences, and repairing the barn. There was something about working the land that brought her peace, a connection to something larger than herself, something eternal. Even the horse, which had once seemed like a mere guide, became a symbol of the woman's strength and resilience. As the days passed, she began to see the horse not just as an animal, but as a partner in this new life. It was a reminder that no matter how broken one might feel, there was always a way forward, always a path to healing. The horse's steady presence was a reflection of the woman's own growth, grounded, calm, and unwavering in the face of adversity. The quiet moments, the small victories, were what truly defined their new life. It wasn't the grand gestures or dramatic changes, but the subtle, everyday acts of love and care that wove the fabric of their story together. Whether it was the woman teaching her daughter how to tend to the animals, or the two of them sitting in silence as the sun set over the horizon, the relationship between the characters deepened in ways that words could hardly express. The woman had learned that rebuilding wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding the strength to move forward. It was about building a new foundation, one that was rooted in love, trust, and the bonds they had formed. In the process, she had rediscovered who she was, not just a survivor, but a woman who was capable of creating a life of meaning, of peace, and of joy. As she watched her daughter with the horse, as they both shared a quiet moment in the fading light of the day, the woman knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome, but for the first time, she felt ready. She had a family, a place to call home, and a love that was strong enough to face whatever came their way. Just when the woman, her daughter, and the horse had begun to feel like they had finally found peace, a new challenge emerged that threatened to undo everything they had worked so hard to rebuild. It came unexpectedly. A storm, fierce and sudden, sweeping across the land with a vengeance. The once serene skies darkened quickly, and within hours, the ranch was under siege by torrential rain and howling winds. The woman stood at the barn door, watching the storm rage outside. Her heart raced as she glanced toward the open paddock where the horses were kept. The wind was so strong now that it rattled the barn's wooden walls, and she knew she had to act quickly. The last thing she wanted was for the storm to cause harm to the animals they had come to depend on. In a heartbeat, she grabbed a coat, shouting for her daughter to stay inside. But even as she made her way toward the paddock, her thoughts were consumed by one animal, the horse. He had always been a steady presence in their lives, a guide, a protector, but she wasn't sure how he would react to the fury of the storm. Would he be frightened? Would he try to escape the paddock? She couldn't bear the thought of him being lost, especially after everything he had done for them. As the woman reached the paddock, she saw the horse standing at the far corner, his mane whipping in the wind, his body tense as he stared into the storm. Her heart clenched as she called out to him, but the sound of the wind swallowed her words. She pushed forward, determined to get to him. But before she could reach him, a flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it shook the ground beneath her feet. The horse bolted, Panic surged through the woman. She watched helplessly as the horse galloped toward the open gate, his hooves pounding against the earth like the drum of fate. Without thinking, she sprinted after him, her mind consumed by one thought. She couldn't let him go. Through the storm, she ran, her feet slipping on the muddy ground, her breath ragged and desperate. But no matter how fast she ran, the distance between her and the horse only seemed to grow. She had never felt more helpless, more powerless. She needed him to come back. She needed him to trust her. In that moment, the woman remembered everything the horse had taught her. Patience, trust, and courage. She stopped in her tracks, taking a deep breath, her body soaked from the rain. Her eyes found the horse, who had slowed to a trot, looking back at her with a calmness that took her by surprise. It was as though he was waiting for her to make the next move, as if he, too, had learned the importance of trust. She called out to him softly, her voice firm but filled with a quiet certainty. "Come back," she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "I trust you." The horse paused for a moment, his gaze fixed on her, and then, as if understanding her words, he turned and began to trot back toward her. Slowly, cautiously, he came closer, and with each step, the woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. When he reached her, she extended her hand, and he nuzzled her gently, as if to reassure her that he was there. The storm continued to rage around them, but in that moment, the woman knew that the bond they had forged was unbreakable. The horse had returned not because she had chased him, but because they had learned to trust each other completely. And just as the horse had been a guide for them in their darkest times, he had now guided them through the storm, literally and figuratively. The woman smiled through the rain, feeling the weight of the past few years lift off her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. She had the strength of her daughter, the loyalty of the horse, and the courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had weathered the storm, and together, they would continue to build their future. As the storm began to subside, a sense of calm washed over the ranch. The horse, the woman, and her daughter stood there, in the aftermath, stronger than ever. The final challenge had tested them all, but in the end, it had only served to reinforce the deep bond they shared. And in that moment, they knew that nothing could break the trust and courage they had found in one another. As the storm finally passed, the sky began to clear, revealing a soft glow of twilight that bathed the ranch in golden light. The rain had stopped, and the once turbulent winds had calmed, leaving only the distant hum of nature's peaceful return. The woman, her daughter, and the horse stood together, their figures silhouetted against the horizon, the storm now nothing more than a memory in the vast expanse of the land. In the wake of the chaos, there was a profound sense of stillness. The air was fresh, the earth damp but full of promise. The woman stood quietly, gazing at the horse, who seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. His breathing had slowed, and his eyes, usually so watchful, now reflected a calmness she had not seen before. It was as if he, too, had come through the storm a different creature, one who had learned just as much from her as she had from him. Her daughter, too, had changed. The fear that had once clouded her eyes had softened, replaced by the confidence that comes from knowing, deep down, that they were no longer running from their past. They were embracing it, all of it, the good, the bad, and the uncertain. And in that acceptance, they had found something even more precious: peace. As the woman and her daughter walked back toward the house, the horse following close behind, a sense of completion settled over them. They were no longer just survivors. They were a family, one bound not by blood alone, but by shared experiences, trust, and an unwavering commitment to each other. Every step they had taken had led them to this moment, to the quiet realization that they had indeed found their place in the world. That night, as they sat around the dinner table, their conversation was filled with an easy comfort that had once been absent. The woman and her daughter laughed softly, the sound of their voices mingling with the crackle of the fire in the hearth. The horse, content and at peace, rested in the barn just outside, knowing that his place in their lives had been solidified. As the evening drew on and the stars began to twinkle above, The woman stepped outside, her daughter's hand nestled in hers. Together, they stood on the porch, looking out over the land that had been both their challenge and their salvation. The bond they shared was unspoken yet undeniable, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of trust. "I never thought we would make it through," the woman whispered, her voice filled with quiet reflection. "But here we are." Her daughter squeezed her hand. "We always make it through, Mom. Together." And in that moment, they knew that no matter what the future held, they had everything they needed to face it. Their past, their struggles had led them to this new beginning. It had shaped them, strengthened them, and prepared them for whatever would come next. The ranch, the horse, and the love they shared had given them a foundation upon which they could now build a new life. One of hope, resilience, and an unshakable belief in each other. The woman smiled, feeling the weight of years of uncertainty lift off her shoulders. With the support of her daughter and the steadfast presence of the horse, she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. They had come through the storm, and in the process they had found their way home. As the night grew deeper and the stars shone brighter above, they knew that this was just the beginning. They had come so far, but their journey was far from over. And together, they would continue to write their story, one chapter at a time, with courage, love, and a renewed sense of purpose. The story teaches us that no matter how difficult or uncertain life may seem, the power of resilience, trust, and love can guide us through even the darkest of times. It highlights the importance of embracing both the challenges and the triumphs we face, for they shape us into who we are meant to become. The bond between the characters, the woman, her daughter, and the horse, shows that together, we are stronger, and with trust and compassion, we can rebuild our lives, heal old wounds, and create a new beginning. The story reminds us that home is not just a place, but a feeling of belonging, of being supported and loved by those who stand by our side, no matter what. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of trust, resilience, and the bond between humans and animals. Together, we can inspire others to believe in second chances and the beauty of new beginnings. If you feel moved by the challenges these characters faced and the courage they found to overcome them, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. What part of their journey resonated with you the most? Was it the strength of the mother and daughter duo, or the gentle wisdom of the horse that led them toward their future? Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about hope, change, and the miracles that happen when we dare to start again. Let's keep spreading positivity and inspiring those around us to believe in the magic of new beginnings.